Hello everyone, welcome back to Seasoned Professional. My name is Hannah Octavia, and today we have our second episode of Season 2. Before we dive into our guest today, I wanted to bring you through a few little milestones that we've reached as Seasoned Professional. So the first one is we have attained, we've attained 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Woohoo! Clay, say woohoo!
Woohoo!
And so that's very exciting. We also had our very first person reach out to me asking to come on the podcast. I do a lot of networking to attain my guests, and it's been amazing to meet so many incredible people, and people are so generous with their time, and it's honestly just been amazing. So I'm glad that I've really developed my networking skills, but the fact that someone has contacted me wanting to come on my podcast to share their story with me is just another world. So very excited about that. That is a huge milestone. And I wrote a whole thing about it on LinkedIn. There was much more eloquent than this. However, to kind of sum it up, the way I feel about this is that I've created a comfortable space where people feel like they can share their story with me. I think I'm attracting like-minded individuals, and I'm hoping the engagement is there, which is just amazing. Coming up this week, we have a busy week coming up. I'm very excited. We're actually doing 4 interviews this week, which I am excited for. I'm also a little bit nervous, but we're going to focus on the excitement mainly. And then on Friday, January 31st, I'm actually going on the radio, which is wild. It's a new experience. I've never done any sort of live speaking engagement before. So very excited about that. It will be on at 12:40 BBC Sussex if you happen to catch it, which would be amazing. And yeah, I think those are all of our little updates for the week. So for our guest today, we have on an absolutely incredible man. He was actually born and raised in the same city that I grew up in. So our high schools are maybe 20 minutes apart, which is quite funny. He also went to the same high school as Ryan Gosling. Our little area just outside of Toronto has produced many stars, including Ryan Gosling, Jim Carrey, Martin Short, Eugene Levy. So it's a very cool kind of place that we live. That also happens to be a senior citizen haven. Anyway, apart from that, our guest today, you may know some of his work. He has worked on Journey to the Center of the Earth 1 and 2. Some of his more recent work includes Lioness, Atlas, the Mayor of Kingstown, and he does a lot of work with Taylor Sheridan, who is the mastermind behind Yellowstone. And you may also recognize him from the Prime Monday Night NHL theme song. Our lovely guest today is Andrew Lockington. He is a film composer, a absolutely wonderful human being. He is so calm, very kind, very generous with his time. And I think he just exudes a lot of hope, which is something that I think we all need, especially going into 2025 when a lot of us are kind of ramping up our goals for the year. He will be a great person to listen to if you're needing a little bit of a push to get your dreams on track. So without further ado, I would love to welcome today's guest, the lovely Andrew Lockington. I hope you guys enjoy. Please share, subscribe, do all the things. Let's get to 15,000 on YouTube. Okay? I love you all, and we'll see you next week. Enjoy. Bye-bye.
All right.
Good?
Yep.
And that one's recording?
It is. Yeah.
Fabulous. Alrighties. Hopefully we don't have a coughing fit through this.
That's okay.
But we're good to go. So, well, welcome back to Seasoned Professional, everyone. You might realize that our set is looking a little bit different today, and that's because I have flown across the ocean and I am now in Canada. We're back home for Christmas, and my aunt and uncle were very gracious enough to let me use their house for a podcast today. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and I've lugged all this equipment through Toronto, so I know it's going to be a good one. But without further ado, I have the lovely Andrew Lockington with me today. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Hannah. Nice to be here.
I'm so pleased. From our communications over email, you seem like such a lovely person, and I think that's a correct.
Ditto. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's amazing that we almost did this in England, I guess, unbeknownst to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been unfortunate if February 2nd had rolled around and you'd never showed up.
So do you know what's funny is you mentioned a few geographical references that all applied to Toronto. They did.
Okay.
And I kept thinking, okay, yeah, I think I know where that is. And it was only the Google Meet time being 5 a.m. that I thought, aha.
That is wrong.
There is something up here geographically.
Yeah, so luckily we were able to squeeze Andrew in over the Christmas holidays while I'm here. And I'm really excited for this chat.
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. The first thing we kind of do on the podcast is we actually look at that childhood photo of yourself. So you can grab it behind you if you'd like. We always like to have a little reminiscence of childhood.
Yeah, interesting. So I had seen this years ago. And when you asked for the photo, I sent out the mass text to my kids and my parents.
Yeah.
And they both my daughter and my parents sent this one.
Aww.
So, yeah, interesting.
And
I do not
which one are you
remember
there?
this.
Which one are you?
I am the one standing like a rock star on the piano bench, playing piano and have a bit of an attitude to my face, I think, as I'm looking kind of perturbed at the camera for interrupting my music moment here. And that's my older sister, Lori. I have two sisters. Lori is my older sister and Megan, my younger sister. So yeah, this was, I guess we were making some noise.
And how old do you think you were there?
I am guessing 1.5.
Yeah.
But I have no idea. My kids are much older now, so I've lost that
ability
to yes. My
to
wife
recognize.
could probably tell you exactly.
How old you were there.
Exactly.
It's so middle child.
Middle child, 2 sisters.
And what were the age gaps?
So my older sister's 4 years older. My younger sister 6 years younger than me.
Oh,
so they're
wow.
10 years apart. Yeah.
And what was that like?
It was great, actually. I loved being in the middle, loved having 2 sisters. I had a very different relationship with the 2 of them. But I think I tortured my younger sister as the older brother, preparing her for all the schoolyard bullies, probably.
Yeah.
But I was, I think, equally as protective. And I had a protective older sister. So I kind of got the best of both worlds, I think.
You really did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your poor younger sister had 2 people being like, I'm going to protect you.
Yeah, exactly. I think my elder sister had to protect my younger sister from me, probably. But it was all out of love, just preparing her. It's funny now having kids, I realized that we teased our kids a lot growing up. There was a lot of joking around in our house. But I think they get to school and the schoolyard games are nothing to them. The teasing is nothing because they're used to it from their parents.
Exactly. And it kind of brings a bit of levity to life.
I think so.
The ability to just kind of joke around with people. And of course there's like a line, I suppose, but I have fond memories of just being teased all the time. You know, I think during puberty, perhaps avoiding that is for the best, but
right.
As parents, I'm not a parent myself, but I can imagine as someone who's grown up, you'd be like, it's nothing, and just say it without thinking.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to cross that line. There's no intentional trying to hurt someone's feelings, but we always wanted our kids to, I grew up being able to laugh and make light of things, and it's kind of fun to look at the world and go through the world like that, so we wanted our kids to as well.
Lovely. And where'd you grow up?
I grew up like you in Burlington, Ontario. So now we're outside Toronto. It's funny. I'm always telling people Toronto. I think I told you Toronto.
Yeah, no,
originally.
I know. You always say Toronto, and then if they say, "Oh, same," then I'm like, "Okay, it's actually Burlington."
Right.
Yeah, because people don't know where that is.
No one knows where Burlington is. Although a lot of people came out of Burlington.
They did. Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling. whose mom was my supply teacher.
That's amazing. So he went to my high school a few years after me. I didn't know him in high school.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So quite a few people have come out of that, like Hamilton, like Martin Short was from Hamilton, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, like that Hamilton, Burlington area, which is interesting. I suppose perhaps because it's closer to Toronto, but I don't know what maybe the boring retirement community just really enlightens the creatives.
Maybe. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as you know, as you've traveled a fair bit, I feel really lucky to have grown up in Canada. We have so much influence from the US in terms of entertainment, but Canada has a very unique sort of take on democracy and capitalism and socialized healthcare, and it feels like a very safe place. And I think as I travel, I realize what a kaleidoscope culturally we live in a very harmonious way that I think you take for granted growing up here. But when you travel, you realize how special that is.
Definitely. And what did your parents do when you were a kid?
So my mother was a teacher.
Nice.
My father worked at DeFasco, a steel company in Hamilton. So both of them took music when they were younger and encouraged us to take music. And my grandparents actually gifted us their piano. So that was the piano that's in the picture. And while they loved music, they didn't follow that field. So I was actually the only one in the family to follow that field.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you all played musical instruments?
We all did. My younger sister moved over to dance for a while and kind of explored music through dance, which my kids ended up doing. But yeah, music was a big part of our lives growing up.
What was the first instrument you played?
Definitely piano.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a Ontario Place this years before your time had the Forum where Budweiser Stage is now. Is it called Budweiser Stage?
Yeah.
So it was called the Forum, and you would go and see outdoor concerts there in the summer.
Yeah.
So I went and saw there was a Canadian pianist named Andre Gagnon from Quebec.
Okay.
That sadly passed away a few years ago. But that was probably one of the big influences on me wanting to do music. I saw him perform, and I'm guessing I was 4 or 5 and just loved it, and went home and just sat at the piano trying to recreate what I'd heard. And so that was it was probably one of the first musical inspiration moments.
That's really cool. And when that happened, did you like verbalize to your parents that you want to do that, or did you just simply sit down at the piano, try to start playing, and then they kind of saw that as a sign to maybe get you into lessons?
I think they had already put me in lessons. Probably I started really young playing lessons. I was probably the worst piano student. I hated practicing.
Oh, it's the worst.
I hated the lesson is tomorrow. It was like, corporal punishment. I hated it. But when I would sit down at the piano, I would practice what I was supposed to do for 5 minutes, and then I would just make stuff up. And then I would sit in front of the piano teacher and play them Mozart, but it would be my version. Somehow they could tell I was straying from what I was supposed to be doing. But that's kind of where I found the joy in music. So I kept with it, but really my joy was on that side of it.
And when they heard you kind of stray from the original, what were you met with? Like, was it praise? Was it like, no, that wasn't what you're supposed to do?
So the piano teachers was not praise.
No.
Yeah, not at all. My parents, I wasn't disciplined for it. I think they appreciated that I was enjoying playing. And I think they knew I was probably going to go into music pretty early on. That was where all of my passion was and my joy. So they definitely helped foster that.
Well, it sounds like you had this innate thing for music. Like, of course, everyone kind of plays around the piano, but it always sounds terrible. But the fact that you were able to, like, actually make something that sounded similar to something else, did you have, I don't know what it's called exactly, but do you have, like, that specific ear that can hear tones?
Like a perfect pitch kind of thing?
Yeah.
So it's really funny you say that because I don't.
Okay.
But I have found there's a really strange thing that I will come up with, like if I'm working on a film or trying to write a piece of music, I hear it in my head first and I'll hum it. And then I'll run down to the piano in my studio. And somehow I know what note I was playing, what I was humming. So that would
crazy.
mean that it's perfect pitch, but I don't think I really have that. I think maybe I've just, I don't know how. I don't know how that happens. But yeah, it was definitely, music was always sort of an internalized language, and it was very cathartic for me. Like for me, talking about my feelings through words was never came naturally, but playing it in music was sort of my way of, getting out my thoughts and feelings.
And what were you like in school?
So I was young in school. I was, at the time, I was able to go into kindergarten a year early. So I was younger than everyone else.
Like
And
3?
I don't know if I was 3. But I was a year younger, more than a year younger than some of the other kids.
And was that just because how it happened, or was
It
there a
was,
reason?
I was born in January, so it
Okay.
was right on the cusp of the cutoff. And I think for a few years they let people born at the end of January get into the previous
I see.
year. So I was always the youngest kid. I was very used to that. So I remember my parents, and we actually did this with our kids. I would get these good, it'd be satisfactory, good, very good, excellent,
Yeah.
and I'd get good. And my parents would say, "Wow, they're saying you're good."
Yeah.
I
good.
thought, "Wow, I'm really smart." And
Yeah.
looking back, I realized I wasn't doing that well.
Ah.
But I thought I was. So my expectations for where I sat in the spectrum were high. So I think I got to the point where I did well in school because of that, because I believed, I identified as being a good student.
I think that's a really good way to go about it.
I think so too. Yeah.
Like, why? Because at the end of the day, good is good. The only reason we think that it's not good is because we're being compared to people who are very good or excellent.
Yeah, I guess it would be the equivalent of my Uber rating being a 2.
Is your Uber rating
So
a 2?
it isn't.
Oh,
No,
okay.
No.
I was gonna say.
So that I've done okay in as well. But but I think the report cards, there was a time in high school where we were able to look back at your report cards from when you were kids.
Really?
They had a dossier.
Shut
of
up.
it was amazing.
Oh my
And I
God.
remember reading these comments that, when the teacher gives you a comment saying, they need improvement or they try, and they're all their ways of saying mean things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're-
No,
you're
it's actually a
terrible.
thing.
It's a thing. Well,
It
you're a
is a thing,
teacher,
yeah.
so you know this thing. My wife's
Yes.
a teacher as well. So
Oh, okay.
same. So and then at the time, you can interpret it through rose-colored glasses, but in hindsight, looking back, I'm like, wow, I was in trouble. But I think I turned it around by grade 4 or 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
And friendships. Were you popular? Did you have a lot of friends?
I did. I had a lot of friends. I was definitely not in the popular kids. I think I was probably more introvert. I know I've heard these 3 terms now: ambivert, introvert, extrovert.
What's
Ambivert
ambivert?
being in the middle.
Oh, okay. I feel like that's most of us.
I think so. I
Yeah.
think I was more introvert at the beginning, but I think I graduated to ambivert. I don't know where I am now. I'm definitely not extrovert, but yeah, I think I probably struggled more with friendships as a kid. I was much more in my head than a lot of other kids. I was more potential energy, less kinetic energy. But yeah, I always had the music thing on the side. And gosh, when you get into high school and you're meeting girls, music thing is suddenly a really good thing.
It's suddenly a
and
very
it's like,
good
wow,
thing.
this is like an ace in the hole kind of thing. So, yeah, that it definitely, I grew into that, and it became a tool later, I guess.
When did you realize that the music thing could get you some girls?
High school,
Yeah.
yeah.
And was there like a moment that it was like, oh, I'm finally being noticed?
I can't put my finger on when it was, but it was definitely, oh wow, this is not just something I like anymore.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? There was a moment. I remember we had a karaoke grade 9 at high school where everyone was getting up and singing, and everyone was bad.
Yeah.
And I remember getting up and singing, and everyone went quiet. And I thought, oh, I've done something wrong. But someone said to me after, you were actually really good. And I thought, oh, cool. I hadn't tried to be good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was kind of my thing. I was the music guy in high school. So I was the guy who would sit down if someone would say, oh, play something, and I would.
And you'd suss the vibe of the room, you'd play the right thing.
Hopefully, yeah.
You know, actually, now that you say that, normally when we start the podcast, we play the song that you chose. So the Joni Mitchell one that you said was your favorite.
Yeah.
I meant to play it, but we didn't. That's okay.
That's okay.
It's
That's
supposed to get
okay.
you in the vibe, but I feel like we have a good vibe anyway.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
We're good. We're good.
And in high school, were you just playing the piano, or did it kind of brought into other things?
So I had a birthday where I asked my parents for a guitar. We drove to Steve's Music in Toronto and
Nice.
shopped for a guitar. And then I kind of got into playing guitar as well, which is even better with the girls. They
Oh,
love
yeah.
guitar players way more than piano players.
Yeah.
And but what was really cool about that is I didn't take guitar lessons.
Okay.
So I picked up a guitar without knowing how to play the chords. There was no YouTube to just do a lesson. So I just kind of figured out how to make sound without learning G, D, and E
Wow.
and A, and learning kind of the three chords that everyone plays on guitar. And I think ironically, it kind of trained me to see the benefit from picking up a musical instrument and not knowing how to make music out of it, and learning and finding my own way of doing it.
And that's very impressive.
Well, I didn't say it sounded good, but it
No,
was my
but
own, it was kind of my own way of doing it at the time.
And do you think, in terms of like the piano and other instruments, like when you're playing, are you thinking about like the notes itself, or are you just kind of like, is it more of a, how should I say this? Is it more of like a mental thing that you're thinking about like actively, or is it more of like a feeling that you kind of go with?
That's a great question. I think there's both.
Yeah.
So I have moments where I sit down and I say, okay, this is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. This is an action cue. I have to sit down, and it's very much like being an architect. Like you sit down and say, here's my plan. Here's what I have to do. This is how fast the music has to be. This is the kind of action it has to have. And then there's moments where you sit and you sort of bypass your brain and you just channel something. That's kind of the coolest. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Is when you just sort of sit there and play. You don't think about it. You just feel it. And then you analyze it after and go, wow, where did that come from? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And I actually, I work with this guy, Taylor Sheridan, who's the Yellowstone guy, and we do non-Yellowstone shows together, three projects. And I remember a few years ago, I was writing, I call them sketches, so theme ideas for this show called Mayor of Kingstown. And I was texting him these little 2-minute ideas. And in the midst of writing these, I heard a friend of mine from high school had passed away. And hadn't talked to him for years, but it just sort of brought up this kind of mournful feeling. I sat down, wrote something quick, not meaning to channel that, but just continuing with the task at hand. And then I sent the stack to Taylor, and Taylor said, I really like these, but that one, what happened with that one? What's that from?
That's so cool.
And I thought it was really cool because it means, like, even to me, all 5 of them sounded the same. They all sounded like they're all emotive in different ways.
Yeah.
And the fact that there was a little invisible seed of DNA in that one, I thought no one would ever pick up on that, but he did.
Wow.
And that was kind of the moment I realized, oh, there's this hidden wave of information in some music that you can actually communicate through. And you know, nowadays when everyone's talking about AI and music, it's the one thing that makes me think, I don't think AI can do that, because that's not something that can be replicated. That's something that it's like an element that you mine out of the earth. Like it's authentic.
Yeah.
And if you're not drawing upon a real human experience, I don't know that will exist in the same way.
I would 100% agree with that. It's like you have to connect with the emotion. With you heard these 5 pieces and you were like, oh yeah, like they all kind of sound similar. But then he was able to pick that out because he had whatever he brought to the table. It was different from what you brought to the table. Mm-hmm. So he could like kind of sense that. But when you say write music, are you like writing the notes, or what does that mean exactly?
So writing music, I think, is a very broad term that is creating melodies, essentially. Okay. So when I say write music, I mean, sometimes it is actually, like I do sit down with a pencil and manuscript paper and I sketch out my melodic ideas.
Yeah.
But I might say I wrote a song which might not even be words. It might just be sitting at a piano and recording an idea and figuring out what's the verse, what's the chorus, what's the bridge, that kind of thing.
Very cool. And you were in a band in high school, correct?
I was. So I was in a few bands.
Okay.
And I was sort of in a garage band with a couple of guys that were a year older than me. Okay. And we never performed anywhere. We just kind of played. It was so frustrating.
Did you want to go?
Oh, I was ready to go. Like, let's put together a set list. Let's go and record. And let's play at a festival. There was in Burlington, there was a Sound of Music festival every year.
Oh, that would have been really cool.
I thought, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And we never really got that far.
Okay. There wasn't that drive.
There wasn't. So back when I was a kid, there was this thing called classified ads, which don't really exist anymore.
In the Yellow
But it was
Pages.
Literally a newspaper, and at the back you could take out 3 lines in the entertainment section. So I was reading through it one day, and there was an ad looking for a keyboard player, professional band looking for a keyboard player. Yeah. And these guys had played with, they were all in their late 20s.
Wow.
And they had played professionally. They weren't working in the day. This was their job, was to play 5 nights a week, tour.
Wow.
So I auditioned. I remember at the time my mother had some blazers that had shoulder pads in them. It was sort of the 80s, and late 80s. That was very trendy for people to wear shoulder pads. Some men wore shoulder pads and blazers. So I would wear my mom's blazers. I was so, I might have been pushing 80 pounds.
Oh, okay.
And, they used to joke, wow, you're really wide, but if you turn sideways, you're invisible. So I went and auditioned, I remember, at this guy's house, and I brought my keyboard, they had everything set up, and I'm like, wow, these guys are, like, this is legit. They have sound system, microphones, and I kind of showed up, and they're like, there was no way at that time to look up somebody, right?
That's true.
I showed up.
Yeah.
They're like, you're Andrew? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. So I auditioned, and it went great.
Yeah.
And then they said, you're 15, like, we can't have a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah,
we can't be and it's not going to work out. So they ended up hiring someone else.
Okay.
And maybe a month later,
yeah,
this guy shows up at the door, lost a phone number, and he shows up in a pickup truck. And my mom goes, it's like after school at 4:00 on like a Thursday. And my mom goes, there's a man.
Like, why is there a man at the door?
There's a man at the door asking for you. Okay. So I go down, and it's this guy, Doug, and he's like, so our keyboard player crapped out, and we are playing a gig in Toronto 3 nights this weekend. Wow. Here's 2 mixtapes of all our songs. If you can learn them by tomorrow, you're in the band.
Wow.
So I'm like, great. So I went upstairs, just started learning all these songs, and somehow had figured them out by the next day, and they picked me up for the weekend and was off and running. And now, being a parent, I'm amazed and grateful that my parents let me go, because it's a lot of trust in these guys. Yeah. The trust was warranted, because these were it was almost like being in a band with 4 uncles.
Gotcha.
Like, they looked out for me, so they were so careful, and I think they knew the weight and the responsibility of having a 15-year-old kid that they were taking into bars to play. Yeah. So, But that was huge.
Wow. That is such a cool moment that you can, like, I would assume in the moment you're like, oh yeah, this is cool. But looking back, it's like, first of all, was I allowed to do that? Second of all, you must have had a lot of courage, do you think? Or
I
was it
think
just a pure love for the music?
I think I was waiting for years for something to happen like that.
Okay.
So, and I was, I guess courage. It's funny. I heard the line years ago in a movie I worked on that it's only courage if you're scared. I don't think I was scared, but ambitious, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at that point, what was kind of the goal in terms of career? Did you have one at that time?
Oh, I wanted to be a rock star.
Yeah.
I thought if this isn't the band that we get famous and release, and they had been in bands that had released albums, so they knew that whole being on the charts and being on the radio. I had no idea what that was like.
Yeah.
So, that was my goal. Was that's what I wanted to do, was be a solo artist and write songs. I was at that point in my life, I was really into writing songs, and so that was, I kind of thought that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I had no thoughts of going to university. My parents really wanted me to, but I kind of thought I'm going to just stay in the band and keep doing this. And lo and behold, I think it was like the week that university applications were due, the band broke up. Everyone went their own ways.
What was the thing?
Just a thing, I guess.
Just a thing?
It just everyone kind of went off and went their own ways.
Okay.
And the bass player, the guy who had come to the door, Doug, and we had a band. Like, he pulled a few other people, and we'd play bars and things like that.
Yeah.
But everyone else kind of went and did their own thing. And that was kind of when university applications were due. And I thought, okay, I'm going to apply to university for music and see what happens. So the timing was really fortunate, because I could have missed it so easily. If it had happened a week or two later, I would have been doomed.
Yeah.
But I luckily got accepted to music composition at Wilfrid Laurier in Waterloo. And next year went there.
Wow. And were you getting paid to be in this band?
I was, yeah.
What were you making?
I remember it feeling like, I'm trying to think, it was like a weekend I'd probably bring home $300 or $400, which at the time was pretty great.
Yeah.
You know, when you're 15, 16 and you're making that kind of money every weekend.
Yeah.
I wasn't spending any of it on beer.
No.
So, but yes, I was, it was a good time.
And being on stage with all the guys and, having that experience, if you could take yourself back to that moment, like, what do you feel when you think about it? I really do equate it to, like, I have a lot of aunts and uncles, and I equate it to that. Yeah.
Like, they really felt like uncles. Like, it was really safe.
Yeah.
Like, I remember I was a tiny kid in a bar, and I remember once some really intimidating people saying, "You don't look like you belong here." And the band stepped in and got in a fight on my behalf and kicked. Like, I felt really protected.
Yeah.
I loved it. It's one of many stages in my life that I loved doing. I wouldn't want to do again, but I have such fond memories of going through it. And it's an interesting point in your life when you realize, like, my kids are getting pretty grown up, and I think I miss them being little, but I wouldn't want them to be little again. Yeah. Does that make sense?
100%. It's like, I can appreciate the young times, but you're becoming like your full individual person. Like, you get to see them from like a completely different perspective, and going back to diapers and screaming tantrums is maybe not so appealing.
Well, and even the hard times in your life, I just said this to someone this weekend. You look back at those things and you think, I had to go through that to become who I am and make the choices I've made since. So it's such an important part of the recipe that you wouldn't want to go through it again. But if you had avoided that, who knows which path you would have taken. Yeah,
absolutely. You seem very zen. Do you think music like centers you and grounds you?
I don't know how zen I am, but maybe. I'm at a weird point in my life where I I have to remind myself that I love it because I do it for a living. It's my occupation, and I have to write music whether I feel like it or not. So I think I'm at a point where I'm trying, and successfully, I've tried really hard to make sure that all of the boxes it ticked for me when I was a kid, in those times I was telling you about, and even in, shortly after that picture, that I keep that joy, and that's the music I'm making still, even though it's not on my own schedule.
That's kind of like the driving force.
I think so.
Still having that joy.
My family, like my wife and daughters, are so grounding for me.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think for a long time in my life, I identified as the music guy. And, in school, I was that guy.
Yeah.
And to them, I'm dad or husband. And I like having my sense of identity being in another place. Yeah. Partially.
Yeah. I can understand that. I think, especially as I work through like various podcasts and stuff, I am realizing that as interesting as someone's career may be, or as accomplished they are, there's so much else about a person that is so fascinating. And from the interviews that I've done, it's almost like the career is not forgotten about, but it's almost an afterthought because the actual individual is just so full and complete in themselves that like that's almost like what I like to focus on.
Well, you're a good example. So I can tell that you love doing this.
Yeah.
And I know that when I write something and it's recorded by musicians, I can tell when they love it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's that, going back to that thing I wrote for Taylor. You can hear this, there's something embedded in the DNA that you can really hear. And I say this a lot to people, you can hear when someone's having fun. Yeah. So if I'm not having fun, I don't think my music is as good. So I need to find that. And to my kids, as they embark on their life paths and their careers, the most important thing to me is that they enjoy it. Because, I remember my dad saying to me once, do what you love and the money will follow. Yeah. And I think that is only true if you love it. Yeah. So the loving part is the most important part of that.
I have chills.
Yeah, well, you're realizing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool.
Yeah. So yes, you do your degree for composition.
So I didn't graduate.
You didn't graduate.
I
I remember hearing this.
Yeah.
3.9. You did like 3.9 years or something?
Yeah. I did 4 years, but I did not complete one course. And when I looked at going back, I had to go back for a full year. And I did not want to do that for the one course.
Yeah, no.
And unlike, like now you can do things remotely. You couldn't at the time. It was all in person.
Fair.
So I had an opportunity to work writing jingles. Fun. For like commercials and advertising. And so I went and did that instead of finishing. I thought, maybe I'll go back at some point and finish, but I never have.
Well, I don't think you need to, considering all what you've accomplished.
The one reason to want to do it was as motivation for my kids.
I was going to say, are they ever like, you didn't finish?
They aren't. No,
they're not? Okay.
They for whatever reason they really wanted to do university and do that. And I don't know that if they had been really passionate about something that wasn't going to college or university, I don't think I would have cared. Because I think it's so hard to find that passion that when you have it, just...
You gotta stick with it.
Yeah, stick with it.
Yeah. When you like left university and went off to do the jingles, what were your parents' opinions on that? Or did they kind of just say, yeah, you love it, go ahead? Gosh,
you know what? They took it way better than I thought.
Yeah.
I think I pulled the rug out. I told them like at the last minute. I didn't actually know until the last minute that I wasn't going to graduate. But I think they just wanted me to be happy. I think they mentioned a few times going back, but I was on a path and I was kind of working my way into the industry, and I was really lucky to mentor with another film composer pretty quickly after that. So I think they just, as a parent, you you really just want your kids to be happy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think if they could see that they were supportive of the path.
Yeah. And when it comes to writing jingles, you know, I remember being a kid and pretending to write a little jingle.
Yeah, yeah.
Or, you know, there's always the one like, Sleep Canada. Wait, oh my God, no, it's Sleep Country. Canada.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, I buy a mattress. Anywhere else, I had to finish that. Sorry, I had to finish that. But when you said that when you're like creating music, you almost have that, you can hear it in your head before you actually play it. Was it the same with the jingles, or is that more of just kind of is the focus more on the marketing rather than the music?
It is. And I remember being a really discouraging part of it for me, is that like when I'm writing music for myself or for a film or a TV show, it's usually something I can relate to. It's like a feeling of affection or excitement or mourning.
Yeah.
And when it's a commercial, it's just like a little earworm.
Yeah.
So, and I remember I'd write something and then you get to the mix and they're saying sale this Saturday on the, and they're talking over it. You're thinking, no, I like that part.
Yeah. Like that was the part
this
whole thing was about.
Exactly. And so I remember thinking, oh, that's a huge compromise. And so I think that's why I very quickly thought, oh, I really want to do film music, because I think there's more opportunity to be emotive and to be heard.
And did that idea of doing film music, was that from the jingles, like kind of triggering that, or did you have that idea beginning university?
I had that as a kid.
Okay.
I loved, there was a TV show when I was a kid called Greatest American Hero.
Oh, cool.
That had a theme song by Mike Shields, who went on to write the Law and Order theme.
Gotcha.
Which is still, I loved that. I loved the Greatest American Hero theme, and I think there was sort of two parallel sides to my music love. One was the whole rockstar girls songwriting thing, and then film scores. Like I love John Williams, I love James Horner. Thomas Newman. I loved these composers and what they were, some of the melodies, and orchestra. I loved string music and orchestra music.
It's nice that you have those two sides to yourself, and from the work you are now doing, it seems like they've really merged together. In some way. Yeah,
that's a really good point. Especially with Landman, this latest show is a lot of the songwriting side, even though it's score. Yeah, there's no lyrics. A lot of that has worked its way into it, and it's funny, that kind of was the key to figuring out that score.
That's really interesting. So you're doing jingles, you don't like it, it's horrible. What was the next step from that? Is that when you got your mentor and kind of progressed that way, or what was kind of the next?
So I was in a relationship at the time that was breaking up.
Oh no.
Which was a good thing for both of us.
Yeah.
But I had gone around and met with a bunch of different film composers, said, how do I do what you do? I really want to do this.
Yeah.
And everyone had a different story. There's not that many of us, but everyone had a different story of how they got to that point. So I met with a composer in Toronto named Michael Dana, who had done a lot of Adam McGoyan films. Adam McGoyan's a very famous Canadian filmmaker. And he had just started to do some Hollywood films, and he said, your background is more orchestral. A lot of the stuff you're writing is orchestral. There's no money in Canada for orchestra in movies, so you should go to LA. So I went down and sort of scoped out LA, met with his younger brother, Jeff Dana, who was scoring shows like 90210 in LA. Yeah. And thought, okay, I definitely want to do this. I want to be down in LA. So got out of my rental agreement, packed the car ready to go to LA with the dog. This is what I'm going to do. And literally the night before I was going to just randomly go, I got a call from Michael Dana and saying, what would it take to lure you out of your jingle writing business? And I in a very bad negotiating stance said, I just quit that actually. So I'm available. I'd do whatever. So ended up staying and working with him for 5 or 6 years, I think.
Wow.
And basically kind of apprenticing with him.
Yeah.
Started a few hours a day, and it kind of grew into bigger stuff, some orchestration for him, one conducting project, and we co-wrote a few things together.
Wow.
And most of it was kind of being a fly on the wall and helping him with his big Hollywood film scores that he just started to do.
Wow. It's funny how life works out that way. It's like similar to what happened with the band breaking up. It's like these moments in your life were almost meant to happen.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and it's like you think that you're going down a certain path, and you think that is going to hold all this promise and positivity, and then the path diverts, and you might think negatively towards it, but it brings all this like beauty and amazingness that actually ended up happening from it.
I felt, so my feeling at the time was there's hundreds of people that would take this job from him, and I'm so lucky I got it. And now in hindsight, I don't think that's true.
Oh, no.
Oh, I think I've since learned as I've looked for help and assistance, it's really hard to find a good person.
Oh,
so,
interesting.
So I recognize that I actually hasn't changed my viewpoint of how lucky I was.
Yeah.
But I think I did a really good job. Yeah. I think I really tried to make sure that I was worth the money he was spending on me. And I looked at it. I remember talking to my dad, and my dad saying, would you go take another course, or would you study film composition? And I said, even if I wasn't getting paid for this, this is the best education I could get. Like I'm going to England to record orchestras and going to Seattle and Los Angeles, and I'm kind of in the wings experiencing how this whole industry works. So
would you have ever imagined prior to this happening that the world of film composition could be so vast? Like, did you anticipate flying to England and to having all these experiences?
I did. And in the research I'd done, that was kind of what big film composers do. So I knew about it. Okay. But I definitely was pinching myself that I got to be a part of it. It was really cool. And for me, like, it's such a drug sitting with, like, at Abbey Road, where you should come actually visit.
Absolutely.
Next
I'd
time
love
we're
to.
there. But sitting with a huge orchestra just for you in a studio, playing something you wrote by humming in your head 2 months earlier, and now it's being realized. Like, I've never driven a Ferrari, but I have a feeling that's what it feels like.
That's what it feels like. Yeah. That's wild. And I'm just curious for our listeners and people who are kind of starting their career, when you went out trying to seek advice from other composers, what were you met with? Like, was it generally they were willing to help?
Huge. Yeah. An amazingly positive, embracing support for it's a really interesting community. There's no cutthroat. No one's trying to push someone else down to get up. Everyone has been really supportive, and there's sort of this mentorship feel of wanting to give, when someone reaches out, wanting to give them the same mentorship you got, the same half-hour coffee chat, trying to help them out. So it was a great experience, and knowing now how hard it is to find that half hour makes me appreciate even more the time people gave me.
Yeah, that's lovely. And so you worked with, was it Michael or Jeff?
So I worked with both. Or did you work with both? Okay. Yeah, but primarily Michael. Okay. So Michael was here in Toronto, and I was sort of his full-time helper. Yeah. and I would go and do orchestration for his brother Jeff. Wow. On projects as well, which we would go out to Seattle and record in Seattle, and he and I would meet there because he was in LA. But the two brothers were keeping me very busy. Yeah. And the great thing about working with them is when I would get opportunities to do, like, little films would come up where they couldn't afford them, and I'd offer my services for a fraction of the price, and they'd take it. And both Michael and Jeff were great about letting
Letting
me
you
go.
kinda-
Yeah, they'd say,
Yeah.
go do that, and just make sure you do both.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
work really hard. But they were very supportive. And I even remember Michael Dana saying to me once, and he said it multiple times, but I remember, I was really just starting out, and
Yeah.
he said, when you're doing big Hollywood movies one day, which I know you will, you'll want to do this.
Wow.
And it wasn't the advice he gave me that I remember, but I remember the confidence he had in me that I would.
Yeah.
Whether he really had that confidence or not, I don't know,
Yeah.
but it really buoyed me into thinking, wow, this is a possibility for
Yeah.
me.
It's amazing how much other people's confidence in you can accelerate your own
Yeah.
growth. It's like you can have all the belief in yourself in the world, but if you're constantly being put down by everyone around you, it's like, well, who knows? But the fact that he was bringing you up is just really special that you had that. And it reminds me of when you said, when you were in the band, the older guys kind of felt like uncles. Do you think when you've worked with, whether it be fellow composers or people on set, do you kind of get that familial relationship with them after a while?
Totally. That's
Yeah.
such a key to the relationship side of my business
Yeah.
is more than half.
Oh, interesting.
Like actually getting in
Yeah.
the same mindset
Yeah.
and just having the same goals.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a little creative cocoon that you get in with a filmmaker or a
Yeah.
producer or a director or a studio exec. You get it's very reminiscent of kids making a fort in the
Yeah.
basement
Yeah.
and getting really excited, and we're gonna do this, and
Yeah.
the parents come and get, it's time for bed,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And
Yeah.
those are the best moments, and that's kind of what I'm always aiming for.
Yeah.
And there's so much of my job, and I'm sure you find this with all the people you talk to, that is about relationships and not about the craft and
Yeah.
the skill set. It's
Yeah.
about fostering this collaboration
Yeah.
that is really what makes for a really successful product.
Yeah, because it's interesting, especially in the film industry. I think a lot of the time people are like, we celebrate the actors or the actresses, and it's like, oh, congratulations, like we really celebrate them. But it is such a collaborative that's okay. It's such a collaborative thing that, like, even when I was listening to the podcast that you were on previously, which we'll link down below, you almost broke it down into the point that, like, there's so much more to actually make a film successful than just people behind, like, in front of the camera. Like, there's so much to it. And I'm curious, first of all, I want to know the first thing you did by yourself and what that felt like. And then I'd really like to know your process of how you score a film. So the first thing you did, how did it feel by yourself?
Oh my
Solo.
gosh. So the first, it's hard to really figure out the smaller films because they started as co-writing with Michael,
Yeah.
and then a few little things on my own, but really small. The big kind of turning point, I had an agent who was had been Michael's agent.
Okay.
And I don't think he wanted to represent me. I just kept saying,
Take
hey, here, I got this project. Here's your commission.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
kept kind of
Oh, okay.
saying, and he'd be like, oh, no, we can't take on anyone right now. But
Yeah.
I kept kind of saying, oh, no, here's your commission on this too. You don't have to do anything. But
Would you give him the money?
I would.
Oh, wow.
But it was not a lot of money.
Okay.
But it was kind of a way of me having credibility that I had an agent.
I see.
And I remember hitting a moment where he's like, okay, well, wait, I can negotiate this for you. And he's still my agent to this day. I mean, it's
Wow.
been 20 some odd years.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that was great. And he had to put me up for this project called Journey to the Center of the Earth with Brendan Fraser
Yeah.
and Josh Hutcherson.
Yeah, I remember it well.
You do? Okay.
Yes, I do.
So
Josh Hutcherson. Like, come on.
I know. He's great. He was just a kid at the time.
I can't believe it. It's crazy.
So he had put me up for that total long shot.
Yeah.
And I went and I met with this exec at New Line Cinema, which is part of Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, I think I'm going to introduce you to the guy in charge of music on this. Introduced me to this guy, Lindsay Fellows, another music exec at their collaborating company. And I got an interview with the director. Huge deal. Flew to LA.
Yeah.
Going in the room with the director, this Academy Award-winning director, not for directing, but for visual effects. He's worked on all these Steven Spielberg and James Cameron movies, and he's a big deal. This was his first big directing. I mean, I didn't know Josh Hutcherson very well, but Brendan Fraser I'd grown up watching. Yeah. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
So go in for the interview and could not have gone worse. I was trying to get in a word edgewise, but this exec and the director are talking, and there was a lot of kind of talking for me. I think because probably I wasn't answering my questions or giving my vision very well.
I see.
But I kind of left and thought, I really blew that. That I kind of knew wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Go out in the parking lot, and this exec is like, well, we'll see what happens. And
as if to say, yeah?
No, as if to say politely, not going to happen.
Yeah,
but,
it's like, nice to meet
I won't
you.
let you down until you're back in Toronto.
I see.
So I said to him, and it was very out of character for me, I said, Lindsay, if you give me this opportunity, I will knock this out of the park for you.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever done anything so extrovert in my life.
Yeah.
And he kind of looked at me and said, okay, give me a second.
Wow.
I'm standing in the parking lot. He goes back into the studio. Mm-hmm. He's gone for like an hour.
And you're just standing there.
Yeah, I'm standing there going, okay. And he comes out and he goes, yeah, I think you're going to get a shot at this.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. So flying back to Toronto that night, I'm leaving for the airport. I get a call from the director and the producer. Come on by. Let's meet. Just the three of us. Wow. And I got it. It was great.
That's, once again, it's like those moments in your life.
It is. There's so many forks in everyone's life. I keep saying that to my kids. Like, you don't know when that big fork is going to happen. So make sure you
are open to it.
Yeah. Make sure you're prepared. You know, like I'm sure everyone says this, but the whole idea that luck is opportunity meets preparation. So make sure you're prepared, because when the opportunity comes, you want to be ready to do it.
And when you went in for the interview, was it, because it sounds like it was kind of based on relationships at first, and then was it about the actual ability to?
Yeah, I think they knew I could do it. Yeah. They had no money. They I think they wanted to hire somebody that they could get for very little money, which was fantastic. Yeah. Because I would have and mostly did do it for nothing. I see. It was a huge opportunity for me. I would have paid to do it. Yeah. So but I think that was the motivation. I think they wanted someone. If they'd had the money, they would have hired someone with a resume. Yeah. But that's great. I knew that would be my way in at some point. Yeah. So it worked out great. And then the producer, the studio, everyone hired me again as they kind of went their own ways. So it ended up being a really important project. And I can trace almost everything I've done since to that one project. Just everything. It's kind of the breadcrumb trail, So that was a huge break for me.
Do you remember how much you got paid?
So I remember that the way it worked was there's two ways that deals work in my industry. You get a package deal or a creative fee. Okay. In the package deal, they give you a whack of money, and they say you have to hire the studio, the musicians, the orchestra, travel, everything gets paid out of this.
That's scary.
It's scary.
Yeah, that's scary.
And so I got paid, and I thought, this is amazing. It's American dollars. I live in Canada. It's great. I think it was the one time that the Canadian dollar became more valuable than the American dollar.
That's rude.
And so partway through the project, I was saying to my wife, I think we're going to have to take out a second mortgage on our house. Like, we are really in the hole. Oh, God. And luckily, before the bills had to be paid. Yeah. But I don't think I think I made $5,000 in the end. Like, it was
Oh my
relative to the
gosh.
amount of money that went through my bank account.
Yeah.
There was very little
Oh,
left.
Lord.
But it got me another project almost right away.
Exactly. So
yeah.
it was kind of that launching off point to the rest of your career.
Exactly. I knew I have to make this sound like $1 million score.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have to put everything I can into it.
And in terms of the actual like logistics of it, do they film the movie beforehand and then you go in and score it, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah, so the traditional way and the usual way is the movie is filmed.
Okay.
They edit the film with temp music. Okay. So they take cues from Raiders of the Lost Ark or Alien or Titanic or all these different other films.
Okay.
And they call it temp music, temporarily put it in to picture.
Okay.
And then they give it to a composer and they say, we can't use any of this music.
Yeah.
So we want you to write an original score that kind of does what this does.
Yeah.
So, and when they say that, they're not saying copy it.
Yeah.
But they're saying the sense of adventure, the parts that are moving, etc. So that's the traditional way of doing it. Now, there's a sort of a movement towards the composer starting writing earlier.
Okay.
And sometimes they'll write a suite, and that suite will get edited in as temp music.
Okay.
But it is original to the film it was inspired by. It's not influenced by any of this temporary other scores stuff. So it's trying to do its own thing.
What do you prefer?
That, by far.
Yeah.
But a lot of it depends on the director.
Okay.
Because there are advantages to temp music in that if they say we want it to sound like a calliope, Ferris wheel, or then that doesn't work. If they have that doesn't work moment and you didn't have to put any work into it, it's fantastic.
I see.
If it's let's try 15 things and you're writing 15 things, you're very depleted by the time you get to finding what the sound is. But if the director trusts you and you kind of get in that creative cocoon early, it's amazing. Like with Taylor on those projects and with a lot of the people I work with now, they'll send me a script and I'll sit down and I'll think, okay, I know you haven't shot anything yet, but this is kind of the vibe I'm thinking.
Wow,
and we'll get
really
that
cool.
sort of back and forth.
Yeah.
And they'll even, in multiple cases, there's examples of the director playing something I wrote on set while they're shooting it.
Wow.
And then the actors go, oh, okay, yeah, this is kind of what we're thinking.
Yeah.
So I love that because the music is actually influencing all the other crafts instead of being the sprinkles on the icing on the cake at the end when everything's already baked.
That's such an interesting concept to do. Like, is that new?
I think some people have tried it. Famously, composer Gabriel Yared, there was a film years ago called Troy. There was Brad Pitt and I'm trying to think who else was in it. But he wrote this score ahead of time and they filmed the film and he got let go 2 weeks before the film came out and they hired someone else to redo it.
Oh my God.
And it was, he had just done all this press about how it was supposed to be this new way of film scoring and this is the future and then it backfired.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's the norm, but with people you trust, it works really well.
Yeah. That's amazing that you're able to have such a intimate part in like the creation of this. Like you are almost creating the emotion for specific scenes. Like when you're reading a script, do you have that same kind of melody going on in your head? Or how do you kind of identify like this is a moment that there needs to be sadness? Like how do you, like what's your method? What's your process?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know that I've ever verbalized this before, but as I'm thinking it, when I read a script, I'm not actually thinking of music for specific scenes.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of what are the underlying themes of the story.
Yeah.
The really cool thing about a book is a book has a narrator that can draw relationships between characters that never meet. Mm-hmm. So you can have a scene of a character in one century and scenes in a relationship in another century, and the book can tie those things together.
Yeah.
But if you film it and they never meet, there's no connection with the exception of the music. So the music can achieve some of those connections that the visuals can't. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. So my 90% of my discussions with a director or a filmmaker are not about music. They're about what are these relationships. Like, for example, I'll say, the son and his girlfriend have a relationship that is very modeled after the father and his wife, because the son grew up seeing that as how two people interact.
Yeah.
So musically, even though they're totally different,
Yeah.
we could use the same theme for both, different versions of the same theme, because they both, it represents love to both of them. So that's kind of a rudimentary example.
Yeah.
But I think I'm looking for that, and also for the tone and the sound. And what will the instrumentation be? Like, is it orchestra? Is it electronic? Is it piano? Is it voice?
Yeah.
What's the palette of the score?
Do you think that, for example, like an orchestra, can it achieve a variety of different emotions depending on how you set it up?
Yeah, so orchestra is really interesting. I'd say music as a whole in film, you need something to like a catalyst for the idea that's part of the story.
Okay.
So a super simple example, if it's a story about a pianist, then piano is going to be an important instrument to the story. I like the Journey to the Center of the Earth, the second movie, Journey to the Mysterious Island, which was The Rock instead of Brendan Fraser.
Yes.
But Josh was back.
Yes.
It took place in Polynesia, Melanesia, like on this mysterious island in the South Pacific.
Yeah.
And with the same line of thinking, the director said to me, I want the music to feel very authentically South Pacific. And he actually gave me the example of Survivor. As Survivor moves to these different islands, or used to, how it would kind of incorporate the different ethnomusicology of those different places.
Yeah.
And so that's a very literal example. But, even sometimes like Mayor of Kingstown in the prison, I thought it would be really cool if we recorded some sounds in the prison and we got the echo of the prison as part of the score.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for an instrument link that's linked, something unique, maybe something I haven't used before.
Yeah.
Orchestra is different because I think the same way we accept that films are 2 hours long, that they have 3 acts, that there's opening credits and end credits. I think orchestra is kind of married to that. It's so synonymous with filmmaking that you don't need an excuse to use a Western orchestra because everyone will accept it. They won't go, where does orchestra fit in? There's no orchestra in the story.
Yeah.
So I think it's always a tool that you use, but the other elements I think are much more catered to the story.
And going back to the prison and like being in that environment, do you think, because I have listened to your other podcast, so I recall you saying when you had a smaller budget, you kind of had to MacGyver different situations, and it ended up being even more impactful than, perhaps using a tool.
Yeah, I hope producers never hear that part of the story.
No. If you want
last thing I want is a
budget,
producer to go, exactly.
Big budget, yes, I need it. I need it all.
Exactly.
No, I had a makeup artist on recently, and she's like, if they give you a big budget, you say, thank you, and you walk away, and that is that.
Well, the great thing about a big budget is if you're creative, you can do anything.
Yeah.
But big budget, a lot of times people think big budget, big orchestra.
Yeah.
And that's not always the creative answer.
Yeah.
So, But sorry, continue.
Do you think anything can be made into music? Like, if you were to look around this room, could you create something?
Yes, but I think the flip side of that is I think there's music everywhere.
Yeah.
I think I hear music already
Yeah.
in places. Like when you're, I'll give you an example. Did you take the subway up here? Okay.
Yeah.
So the squeak of the subway going around a corner,
Yeah.
there's actual notes and pitches that you hear with that kind of high squeal of the wheels on the track. So I think I hear those things and think, okay, there's music there already.
Yeah.
How can I accentuate that or build on that?
Yeah. And is that kind of another way that you can blend the bits of the story in with the music?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something I'm always looking for, little ways into the story
Yeah.
to try to be within the DNA of what's already there. So
Yeah.
you're not totally adding a separate entity and forcing it upon the story.
It's a very selfless thing you do. It's almost like I don't know how to put this, but I feel like this could be completely wrong. I could be, completely off about this, but I think a director has a specific vision when they go into making a film, and it might be like their specific vision, whereas you understand the vision of the director or understand the vision of the film, and you're able to take away whatever you think about it and just create the emotion without yourself being involved. Does that make sense?
It does, but
Yeah.
it's funny, yourself has to be involved.
Okay.
Or it doesn't
okay.
work.
Interesting.
So I remember someone equated it once to me, because you can spend a lot of time in that first meeting where you present your ideas.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know what they're going to hear. They're sitting down and they're thinking, okay, they have an idea in their head.
True.
And you present your ideas and you think, this is everything. I've put everything into this. I think this is great.
Yeah.
And then you play it for them and they go, no, I don't think so. And someone said to me, it's like your baby being run over by a bus.
That's really intense.
Yeah, very intense. So
would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went through a point where I thought, well, then I'm not gonna show them my baby. Then I'm gonna protect it by doing something that I'm okay to lose. By not putting myself into it, as you're saying.
I see.
And that doesn't work because it's not as good.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the backbone. It's not authentic.
Yeah.
So you actually have to get to a point where A, you're okay with somebody going, nah, that's not what I'm thinking. And more importantly, B, you get inside their head and you try to figure out and merge your idea with their idea.
Yeah.
Or extrapolate on their idea and make it your own. So that's again where the relationship stuff comes in.
Yeah.
And so much of my time spending with a filmmaker or a director is not on music. It's hiking, or it's going for dinner and having conversations about the story, or going to set and talking about things about the story and trying to get inside their head and come up with a musical representation of what they're thinking.
Do you think that's common of composers to have such a relationship with these people?
I think so. That's a good question. For me, it's made all the difference in terms of successfully getting through the process. And I think I would equate it to, like, I've had orchestrators. Like, an orchestrator is someone who will take something I've written and arrange it for cellos or arrange it for brass.
Gotcha.
And I've had really talented people go and do something creative with it that's really cool, but I wasn't a part of that creative step.
Yeah.
And I don't like it as much because I wasn't included in it. It doesn't feel like me. It feels like them.
Yeah.
And so I think I've kind of applied that to directors and making sure that my part of the step they're involved in. So that it feels like an extension of their vision instead of someone new coming in and putting their stamp on it.
Yeah. It's so interesting because just, again, what I'm learning about this podcast is everything comes back to relationships. Like, the only way that you're going to do anything in life is if you have relationships with people and facilitate those in order to get to the next level. So it's nice to hear, and I'm sure the listeners will be able to kind of reflect upon this conversation and realize how crucial relationships have been to not only getting your success, but also keeping you grounded, as you said, with your daughters and your wife. You know, you're not just a music man, you're also a dad and all these other things. So it's nice to really kind of have a discussion about that and see how influential they are in life. But with that being said, when you started like picking up momentum in your career, how have you found, like, first of all, seeing your name on like the credits or the beginning openings of Lioness, and perhaps, you know, socializing with people who are of that higher caliber? How do you feel? Do you feel any different in who you are?
So it's funny, the feeling of success is kind of inversely proportional to your resume.
Yeah.
In that the more you do, the more you recognize that that the work isn't necessarily better than you were doing before.
Okay.
You're just in a different group of people. And I don't
Yeah.
know, it's funny. I almost feel the more I've done, I still feel a lot of pressure, and I still feel insecure about certain things when I present it, and it hasn't changed. There's no made it moment. There's no moment where, oh yeah, this is it. I don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
But do you watch tennis at all? Are you a tennis fan?
No.
Okay. So there's a tennis player. He's just retired, Rafael Nadal.
Okay.
And his uncle coached him. And when he won his first major tennis, his uncle said, stay humble and stay hungry.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
In that, and that you don't have to, the humble part's easy because there's a lot of really talented people.
Yeah.
And you just want to try to stay doing your best work and try to feel like you belong with the really talented people. And also the stay hungry is easy too, because, you know, when you do this kind of line of work, and it's turning into all occupations these days, no one's in a job for life anymore. You will be in a job for a certain amount of time and switch and different occupations. And, you know, we're going to be all interviewing for lots of jobs and moving around. And so it's important to stay hungry and not get comfortable and keep trying to do your best work.
Mm-hmm. Do you have, looking back at everything you've done, is there something that you'd consider your best work at the moment?
I don't think so, which
No.
I'm happy actually that I can say that. When I look back, I guess the really special things to me are the great collaborations. Like I've met some of my idols and gotten to work with them, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And gotten to sort of mine their brain and ask them a lot of these questions. Like probably one of the biggest ones was Donald Sutherland. I did a film with him, gosh, maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay.
That he wrote and directed and produced and acted in.
Oh, jeez.
And
Busy guy.
it was another director actually that worked on it with him, was co-producing it with him, that introduced us.
Wow.
And I remember, I was a huge Donald Sutherland fan, and his son, Kiefer Sutherland, and his other son, Rossif. Like it's just royalty, film royalty to me.
Yeah.
And we became really good friends. And I got to ask him so many questions about the industry and stories about his time working. And it reminded me of that band moment of being with my uncles. Like he kind of felt like an uncle. You know, very paternal, sort of look after you and, you know, support you. And this is great. And so those relationships, and I feel that with Taylor too, and Brad, who I work with, and Richie Mehta, another director. I feel like I've got these comfort zones where if I write something really off the wall, but I like it, but I think someone else won't like it, I can throw it to them and say, what do you think of this? And feel like there's a creative cocoon where it's a safe place to try something different. So
that's amazing. It's really nice that you have like developed that family almost. Like, I'm curious, we kind of always go back to the whole, you know, they felt like uncles to you. Do you think now that you are so far in your career, do you think people are starting to view you like that? Like, I wonder, you talk about your idols and you say you got so much from your idols. What about the people that idolize you?
I don't really think about that. It's funny. I think I'm still the kid that is
It
a
is
year
just like,
younger than
whoa.
everybody else.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
it's strange, but I feel, I'm not aware of that anyways,
Yeah.
but I hope so. I
Yeah.
hope people kind of pick up on I hope they get my excitement
Yeah.
and passion for it. 'Cause I mean, music to me, it's literally like a drug. Like, I feel like I can pinpoint the moments in my life where I had a musical experience where it's just like this incredible magical thing where you get, you know, the hair stands up on your arms and it's like this emotional
Yeah.
experience. I don't even know how to describe it, but that I'm trying to piece together those things. And, you know, like we talked about luck, I'm trying to be ready for when those opportunities come, because you don't know when that'll happen.
No, you really don't. And you just have to prepare yourself for it.
Yeah, and be open to it and put
Yeah.
all the pieces in place and hope it happens. But you never know when they'll happen. Like, it's funny, Landman that's out right now.
Yeah.
There was a moment I was telling you about Michael White, who's the music programmer, really good friend that I work with, and I was at his place and we were going to record some harmonica through an amplifier as this
So cool.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just started humming through a microphone into the guitar amplifier. And it was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And,
Yeah.
and it ended up being a huge part of the score. But again,
Wow.
it was just like this, oh, let's try this kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
So, and it ended up being a really emotional element to the whole show. And I didn't wake up that morning and go, oh, this really cool thing will happen by accident.
Yeah.
So it's, keeping open to those moments.
How do you not, because as someone who is not super musical in terms of talent, I enjoy music, but, you know, how do you not, like, do you ever find yourself almost repeating things, or how do you come up with fresh ideas?
Yeah. The biggest trick is that you hear stuff in your head, swirling around in your head.
Yeah.
And if you listen to a lot of other people's music, you
Yeah.
have to question whether it's yours or is it
okay.
influenced by someone else.
Yeah.
So I really try to close myself off when I'm writing from
Interesting.
listening to other music.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And in fact,
Interesting.
gosh, like having 3 daughters watching
Yeah.
Barbie movies upstairs when you're trying to come up with a theme and you're hearing these Barbie movies over and over
Yeah.
from the living room is hard. I was constantly saying, girls, turn it down. I don't want to hear that anymore. Don't play me a new song.
Yeah.
Because I'm working out or showering or walking
Yeah.
and running through melody ideas in my head. So the last thing I want is it to be infected by something else. But yeah,
Wow.
it is tricky sometimes to keep them separate. And I think it comes back to the idea of finding what is the unique musical DNA
Yeah.
of each story, so that it lives within that bubble and it can't be cross-contaminated.
And when you're, you know, walking the dog or at home and you're hearing these melodies, do you find that depending on where you are, because I know you travel a lot for making music, do you find that, like, your surroundings impact what just naturally comes to you?
Totally.
Yeah. And because did you work with a choir?
I have a bunch of times. Yeah.
So how does that, because I don't know, as like, obviously that's music, but I think innately when I think about music, I think of instruments. So it's interesting that you utilized a choir to achieve that sound.
So it's sort of 2 parts to that comment. One is definitely where you are and what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about living in Toronto instead of LA is that all of LA feels like an office to me.
I see.
Because it's the industry and it really overwhelms the geography of the city.
Yeah.
So your interactions are all based on the industry.
I see.
And I really like having a foot outside where my experiences can be can be from outside the palette. And then, I mean, the choir thing, you're right. It's like another instrument. It's another sound that is one of the best, because so much of what you're trying to write, like the best melodies are things someone can hum.
Yeah.
So I always, like, if you think about, there's a reason why a really long melody is uncomfortable, because you can't hum it without taking a breath. So if you think about melodies or phrases, like the Indiana Jones theme is dun 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 dun, pause, dun dun dun. It sounds like a sentence.
Yeah.
Like, did you know that?
Yeah.
When you go to it sounds like someone talking or singing.
Yeah.
Whereas if the melody went on and on and on, there's something subconsciously uncomfortable about that. So one of the things I love about cellos, they sound like a human voice. And obviously voice sounds like a human voice.
Yeah. So
I think definitely somebody will internalize something more if they can recreate it or hum it. And so a choir is an amazing use of kind of getting partway there.
do you ever strategically make a melody that sounds uncomfortable and kind of goes against how you're saying, like, oh, you say a few words, you take a breath, say a few words? Would you ever ignore that and create something out of that?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people think that music is trying to reiterate what's on screen. So make you feel the emotion that they're feeling, which it can do for sure, because it's a combined effort.
Yeah.
The actor is taking you partway there. Yeah. But you mentioned Lioness. That's a great example. So Zoe Saldana in that show is very stoic, very guarded.
Yeah.
And when I started scoring that, I realized she's walking a tightrope with how she is She is very careful to give you a little crack into what she's feeling without flooding you, all of her emotions coming out. And the music could so easily ruin it by being, here's all the emotions coming out, or be so stoic and rigid that it is almost a veil for you seeing what she's doing.
Yeah.
So I think the best film scores are trying to say something different than the actors are saying. So they're telling a different part of the story, or they're allowing them to drive and not flavoring it one way or another. That said, I recognize how spoiled I am to be able to score these actors, because I've had times in my career where they say, this is a romantic comedy. These two actors hated each other. There's no chemistry on screen. We need the music to make it feel like. The music can definitely bend 20%.
Yeah.
But any more than that, and the whole thing breaks, shatters.
Yeah.
So you have to. I'm really lucky on the stuff I've been working on recently.
Yeah.
That the acting is just, like, pinch myself how good they are.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I'll sit there and I've got to write something, and I watch it and go, wow, oh shit, I'm supposed to actually write something for this. I get absorbed in it.
Wow.
So the great thing is it gives me the freedom for the music to do something totally different, because the scene works all by itself with the way the actors are doing it.
Yeah, so you don't feel that pressure.
You're not trying to correct anything.
Yeah, exactly. This is a totally off topic question, but what was your first song at your wedding? What song did you dance to? And the reason I asked this was because you said that music marks specific points in your life. So I'm wondering, are there specific songs that you think of and reminds you of specific things?
That's a good question. I think it might have been a Holly Cole cover of a Beatles song, but I can't remember the name of it.
Uh-oh.
It's not one of those.
You're going to get in
I
trouble.
know. It's not one of those on the graph of
Yeah.
marking certain moments, but
Are there songs that mark certain moments?
I guess so. There are songs that I think I hear, and I hear that DNA bit in them that Taylor heard in something I wrote.
Yeah.
The Joni Mitchell, and it's funny to do a reference that everybody knows.
Yeah.
But the version of both sides now, Joni Mitchell, who's Canadian, that is in Love Actually with the orchestra.
Yeah.
I think that's an incredible version.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the orchestra. I love and we call it rubato, where it's not a rigid time signature. It just feels like it's very organic and almost like a prayer. I love that piece.
Yeah. And with that being said, we are sadly wrapping up soon. So I would love to hear about maybe some future goals that you have in mind, or plans, or if you can say what you're working on, just kind of see where you're at the moment.
So I am really lucky with this year. I've doing all 3 shows with Taylor again. And then I am doing a film with my friend Richie Mehta, who is a film based in India, which I love. We've done a bunch of projects together.
Yeah.
And goals, I think more of the same. I'm really happy with the music, the style, and the projects I'm working on, and I think I've found a comfortable, uncomfortable place, if that makes sense. That I can be vulnerable in what I'm writing and kind of insert myself into the music, but I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. So, and I think that's kind of been where I've found my most success. It's funny, for years I was self-editing a lot of stuff that I did and thinking, okay, no one's going to like this. I'm going to try to make it more like this. And in recent years, I've sort of just trusted it and thought, see what happens. And people have responded well to it. So I don't know if there's more vulnerability in it that people hear and like, or I don't know, but it's kind of funny. Sometimes when you stop trying so hard, things land in a good way.
Do you think that vulnerability that you speak about, has that been able to maintain the joy you have for it, do you think?
I guess so. I mean, like any job, it's funny. There's days where I think, I hate my job.
Really?
I hate this. I don't want to do this anymore. And then I'll talk to my daughter who's writing a biochem exam.
Oh, God.
I think, okay, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, no.
Or someone else is doing a business exam or accounting. And I think, I don't like any of that stuff. So I'd rather do what I'm doing. So, I think it's a conscious effort to find the joy in it. To make sure and to try to not make it feel like a job. So, and that's, the answer is, I do find the joy in it, but I have to work at finding the joy in it sometimes.
And my final question, if you could speak to someone who is kind of lost in their life at the moment and they're trying to find that thing that brings them passion and joy, what would be your advice?
I hope everyone has something. I think that for me, and my advice to my kids is, find what it is and don't think about how to monetize it. Don't think about how to make it a career. Just find something you love. Because it doesn't necessarily have to be the way you make a living.
That's true.
But I think that finding things we're really passionate about is, to me, that's the engine that keeps you going. So when I am interested in people, that's what I guess I should be more forthright and just ask them, what's your engine? But that's what you want. That's the information you want when you get to know people. So I think finding that is, whether it will be your career or not, that's kind of the key to getting direction.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
I really feel like as you were speaking, I was kind of like as I interview people, I'm like, I kind of go through the thoughts of the questions I'm going to have. And I was like, I could go that way. I could go this way. I could go that way. Like there are just a million different ways that we could go. And I'm really happy. I'm excited to listen to this back and see.
Well,
see
this
what we
was great.
got.
And it
Yeah.
was so nice to have a conversation and not just questions.
Yes.
You're really good at that. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I will be at Abbey Road in the new year.
You open invitation. Yeah, to come hear it.
Lovely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Did we get the battery or did it die?
It just died. Right
Oh, beautiful.
Perfect.
Perfect
Serendipitous.
timing. Oh, well, how do you feel?
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. You're really good at this.
Oh,
So what are your
gosh.
goals? Like, what are you...
I don't know. Like, I have like quite a few people for this season, so I'm really excited about